going to do it the other way around this time. If you like this video, please rate, comment, subscribe, and if you dislike it, then please tell me why so I can improve. I was going to talk today about the implications of atheism and what implies atheism. I often feel that when people describe themselves as atheist, they are describing themselves as atheist mainly in opposition to organised religion or theism, and this appears to be very important to them. But I think that when they do that, they are allowing themselves to concede to a religious perspective, because in a sense the question of whether there is or is not a God is a consequence of other beliefs that people have. It's not something that tends to be started from, it's something that is implied by other beliefs, whereas what it actually implies is itself is actually quite limited. For example, an atheist is unlikely to believe that Jesus is the Son of God and is God in human form, or that the Quran is a message from God, because they don't believe in God. However, they could believe, theoretically, that the Quran is revealed knowledge in the same way as certain atheist Hindus believe that the Vedas are revealed knowledge, but not revealed by an agent. However, on the whole, atheists in the West don't look at things in that way nowadays. What they are, in fact, now what I'm going to talk about is Dennett's atheism. That is, the atheism that is espoused by Daniel Dennett, by Richard Dawkins, and a number of other people. One of the Hitchens people, who I can never remember which one it is. And where it's coming from, what its inferences are, why it follows, why atheism is followed from that position. Because it's a lot wider than just the claim that there is no God or the lack of belief in God. You could lack a belief in God, by the way, because you don't have it in your meme pool, as it were. It's not part of your culture that you believe in God, or it's not part of your background that you believe in God because, say, you were brought up by a family that didn't have anything to do with religion. But if you actually actively believe that there's no God rather than assuming that there's no God, that is the general philosophical definition of atheism. It is not the absence of belief in God, it is the presence of belief that there is no God. Look it up in the philosophical dictionary if you don't believe me. That is which way around it normally is. Which brings me to the fact that I feel that the new atheism has a load of other assumptions with it and a load of other backgrounds which are actually more important to it and to the people that believe in it than the atheism, or at least they ought to be. Obviously I'm saying this from the outside, but it strikes me as odd, as somebody who is an ex-academic philosopher, that things tend to be discussed in this rather arse-about-face manner. So those implications are scientific realism, metaphysical naturalism, and methodological naturalism. Now, scientific realism I'm going to leave aside for the moment because it's difficult to discuss, because I have got all this baggage about skepticism, because I'm a skeptic myself, and I feel that scientific realism is really audaciously peculiar. So I don't really want to go into scientific realism now because there's huge, massive stuff about that. But metaphysical naturalism is the idea that everything in the world is susceptible to rational explanation, and that there is only one type of substance, which is the physical. And it excludes the supernatural. In terms of, it would obviously exclude God, angels, spirits, the idea of dualism, psychophysical dualism and idealism, and it would also probably be committed to supervenience, which obviously is the subject of my MA dissertation, so I could go on and on about that, but I'm not going to right now. Methodological naturalism is basically the idea that the scientific method is valid and that it can equally validly be applied to philosophy. In other words, that philosophy is a continuous subject with natural science. Now, there is a problem with the border between the natural and the supernatural. It does vary, and it varies particularly noticeably when you look at non-Western forms of atheism. Now, harking back to Jainism, which is one of my favourite subjects, of course, Jainism has naturalistic explanations of the soul, karma, and reincarnation. It believes that the soul is a substance. It believes that karma is another form of matter which is attracted to the substance effectively by static electricity, so it forms an ionic bond with the soul, which then increases its mass, pulls it down and prevents it from rising into moksha, or enlightenment. So those are all naturalistic explanations, but obviously not ones which contemporary science would be very comfortable with. And there are other examples in the West. For example, Ignis Fatuus, the appearance of glows above decomposing corpses, appears to be due to phosphorescent bacteria, or possibly the release of inflammable gases and sort of low-level combustion. There was a time before people realised that, and at that point it was considered to be a superstition. Now, the same applies to meteorites. There was scepticism about meteorites because they arrived from space. People didn't really have a concept of space at that time, and so these rocks arrived from somewhere and nobody knew where they came from, and so there was scepticism in that direction as well. Now, the thing about that is, if you have that kind of explanation for things, and the fact that certain things are excluded from things because they're not recognised by an established community of scientists, academics and so forth, does not imply that they're not real. Although it might suit certain people's worldviews to see it as very convenient that these things are not real. And but what I'm trying to say really is the implications of naturalism, whether methodological, as espoused by the great Willard Van Orman Quine, which nobody's ever heard of, even though he's the most important analytical philosopher of the 20th century probably, along with Bertrand Russell, and other people, and metaphysical naturalism as well. Those have a whole load of important things about problem solving and so forth, which actually seem to be far more important than the actual espousal of atheism, which is basically an argument between a small group of influential fundamentalists who describe themselves as Christians and a group of people who've taken up a polarised position against that, and then use their opinion to create a kind of outsider art form of philosophy, which is interesting, but which has been addressed in great depth by philosophers in the past, which they don't seem to be aware of, which is odd, because Daniel Dennett, obviously, is a professional philosopher and part of their community. So, well, I've put my thing at the beginning now, so goodbye.